Hello there, my name is Rivaan, and I am going to be presenting on the Anarchy experiment. It's been 8 months in the making, with 13,000 participants and 0 rules. This is its story. Now, when you think of the two words social experiment, the first thing that probably comes to mind is the Stanford Prison Experiment. The Stanford Prison Experiment was an experiment in which a real prison was to be simulated in order to find the effects that anonymity and someone else having a position of power over you would have on human behavior. The expectations of the Stanford Prison Experiment were that it would be conducted in complete isolation because the participants, the prisoners, would have no way to contact the outside world except for visits, which would be completely supervised. Additionally, they would also have complete anonymity because the participants, the prisoners, would only be referred to by their tag numbers rather than their actual names. It was meant to last 14 days in total. The reality, though, was that the guards began abusing their power over the prisoners. The experiment only lasted 6 days before being shut down due to the guards being extremely brutal. The experiment proved that if humans are given positions of power and anonymity so that their actions will not have any consequences, then they will be as evil as they possibly could. But you see, that's not necessarily true. Many of the guards later on in interviews said that they thought that the expectation was that they needed to be violent on the prisoners. They believed that the reason why they were being paid to do this experiment was so that the researchers could get the conclusions that the researchers wanted. And the guards assumed that the researchers wanted the conclusion that humans were naturally violent. So the guards began acting extra cruel and extra brutal upon the prisoners because they thought that the researchers wanted them to do so. They basically biased the whole experiment by themselves, and that means that the experiment isn't really all that valid. Now, let's imagine a dream experiment. We have thousands of participants, total anonymity, and some of these people have positions of power over the others. Is this possible? The short answer is no. It's not. Not in the real world. You can't do this without ending up with a fallout that's worse than the Stanford Prison Experiment's fallout. But with this in mind, I really did want to find out what would happen, so I created a virtual server. Not that kind of virtual. This kind of virtual, like a virtual world in Minecraft. So I created a server, I hosted it online, and I began advertising it. I wanted as many people as possible to join it. Here were the ground rules for it. It would be completely self-funded. I would not pay a penny. There would be no bans unless anyone would try to leak someone's personal information, and I would track the destruction on the virtual map over time. The main rule for this entire experiment, though, was that there were no rules. Anyone who joined was allowed to do whatever they wanted to the map. They could build stuff, destroy stuff, they could kill other players, steal items, steal whatever they wanted. They could basically do whatever they wanted. My assumption was that people would be extremely violent with each other. There would be almost no friendship made on the server, and that the server would become a violent, toxic place that would be almost impossible to have fun in. If anyone ever builds any kind of base or city or any sort of build, it would instantly be destroyed, and that people would only join in order to destroy stuff. So over the last 8 to 9 months, a total of 13,802 people ended up joining the server. The majority, as you can see, didn't actually end up rejoining. They just joined, found out that they didn't actually like Anarchy, and just quit. But a lot of people ended up playing more than once. This is the same data, just in a pie chart, so it might be easier to see. A lot of people didn't rejoin, but a majority of people ended up playing for a while. So here's another render of the server that I took a couple months ago. And well, I wanted to see how many people would end up destroying stuff. Like, TNT, blowing stuff up. How many people would do that? So we're going to use this pie chart, which basically takes away the people that only joined one time and just instantly quit, because those guys didn't really have a lot of time to do anything on the server at all. And so this is a pie chart of the amount of destruction that people caused on the server. As you can see, 82% of people didn't destroy anything at all. They weren't violent. They didn't do any sort of violent activities. A small, like 13% of people ended up doing some griefing. 3% did actual griefing, as in like actually destroying people's stuff, actually destroying stuff that other people cared about. And that tiny, small red sliver you can see over there, that's about 0.3%. Those were the people that actually did real destruction on the map. But what about building? What about people making cities like this one, or towns like this one, or even like castles like this one, bases? Well, here's a pie chart of that as well. As you can see, the majority of people ended up building something or the other, even though they knew that since there were 0 rules on the server, anyone could destroy what they built. Still, 60% of people ended up building something or the other. Only 0.3% of people ended up building really big bases, but medium to large builds still take up 6% of the entire pie chart, although 30% of people didn't end up building anything. As you can see from this, not that many people griefed or destroyed. Many people ended up building bases or cities and putting their time and their effort into something that others could easily destroy in a win. The server was actually kind of fun to just hang out in and have a bit of fun. So while I wouldn't go ahead to say that people I wouldn't go ahead to completely just deny the Stanford Prison Experiment's results, I would like to say that maybe humans aren't as violent as people say they are. At least not unless they have some sort of provocation to act violently the way the guards in the experiment had. This is a render of the server's map. As you can see, the area in the center has been just completely destroyed, but around it, the land is still pretty intact. People have built massive pyramids. So yeah, the moral of the story for you guys is that humans aren't naturally evil unless you make them be evil.
All right, nice job. So we have time for about one question for Rivaan.
What's the age group of the participants participated in your tournament or whatever the experiment?
So 60% of the people were between the ages 17 to 24. I expected that a bunch of kids would join, but it turns out that a place with no rules where like people are always cursing in like the chat and being really toxic, that's not really a place that most kids enjoy. So anytime kids joined, they would leave almost instantly, and only like young adults or like teenagers ended up staying.
So are you
which was
convinced?
kind of counter.
Yeah, are you convinced that that age group is whatever in the sample of your experiment is good enough to judge the and kind of they are aging from anywhere between 7 to 70s, right? So are you convinced still? And
Yeah, so teenagers
results?
tend to be the more violent group of people. So if the more violent group of people turned out to be less violent than expected, then I think that that could be a good model to show that the people that are normally less violent would be even less violent when put into such a situation. Because like teenagers and young adults, they tend to be the people that
more aggressive.
Yes, and if they were less aggressive, then think about like the normal general mass of people.
Okay, thank you. Good one.
Thank you for listening.